floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm a bit biased here because I'm a startup myself and I learned the hard way. And at the same time, I'm providing legal and IP advice for another startup, which is a bio-nanosensing platform-based company. So it's a whole mouthful. And they call themselves Pharma Diagnostics, but the name was too difficult and actually frightened a bit the public. So they changed it into the brand of Forion. And I can tell you, when I was approached by IIPLA to come here and talk about IP management for startups, I wanted to do it under my own company or under IMEC because I was not even sure whether we would exist today. And actually, we're still in a really unsecure situation. So, to ask whether a startup or the IP management of a startup will become costly, yes and no, it depends how you apply it. If you apply it really inefficiently, and you take really expensive consultants for each domain, it will be. So you have to have people who are open-minded, don't charge too much, and also share the same vision, mission, and strategy of the startup. You have to become connected with it and gain feeling. And why a 4D perspective on IP management? Well, first of all, I have something with the number 4. And secondly, I like a 4D perspective, and I will explain you why. So has anybody from this public ever dealt with a startup? And did you ever went really to the valley of death with a startup at the tilting point of bankruptcy? So I guess everybody knows that you're dealing in a situation of high uncertainties. You have some kind of crazy visionary who dreams big and sometimes has to put back his feet on the ground. And that's often the CEO of your startup. So he has an idea and he guesses that this idea might be a solution for a problem, but he doesn't know what problem he will solve, and he doesn't know whether the outcome will be a solution and what it will be. So actually, based on those assumptions, he has to predict the future. Try selling that to an investor. And actually, you're not even sure which people are in your team, who you need to hire, whether you will have enough resources or not. What will be the outcome? Will you have a product or not? And like Eric Ries would say, fail and fail fast. But here in Belgium and most of the time in Europe, it's not really done. And if you fail as a CEO, they will replace you. Or they will say, you cannot actually find the excuse like, lessons learned, because it's costly to learn those lessons. So actually, you have to have a good stomach, like my colleague just said, because having a startup is being on a big roller coaster. In the beginning, everything is fantastic, great, you have a great idea, and you're going to rule the world, and you're going to impact it and be disruptive. And then all of a sudden, actually, you're in here. And what will happen is, are you going to pivot or devote? Are you going to reloop, make a feedback, or are you going to stay there? And how will you crawl out? And you better land on your back, face above, so you can get up really fast. And then hopefully, when you pivot and you get into your feedback loop of your end customers and you iterate a lot, you will get successful. So how will you manage this up, down, high, low, and all these insecurities. First of all, before you start a startup, but it's difficult, but at the very beginning, make sure that you have some core foundations. Define a core team and define a basic business framework of which the foundations remain during insecurities, but which can be adaptable and fine-tuned on the road. And don't hire one expert who will do everything to save costs, but hire a core team with the same mission, vision, and strategy as I said, who have one main higher goal, and let them collaborate. And secondly, define your basic business framework, which will be process-oriented with lean methods and tools, also adaptable, and find people who can question themselves and are adaptable. So create a 4D core team. What I learned is that IP management is not something that you do alone. I'm collaborating closely with Vincent, who is an IP patent attorney, who has also a way of thinking in business. I am most of the time legal. We have an R&D expert, and we have a business development manager. And during the hiring in startups, look at people who have T-shaped profiles or the potential of having a T-shape. What does that mean? Well, first of all, you have their core expertise here, but see that they can also learn during practice to have more feeling with IP, think business-wise, and see that the person who is involved from BD also feels a bit for IP and legal or train him. And most of the time, a business development manager comes from the R&D section. And secondly, R&D might be really reluctant to sit in a patent team of a startup, but just convince him because you need him, because he will have to feed the patent attorney to file quality patents. And for the 4D vision, I will come later on. So secondly, create your basic business work frame. Start with your R&D roadmap, which will define your business roadmap. And out of those two roadmaps, I cannot say business plan because it's not a business plan, it's something where you will be heading towards. You can define what the startup company's core technology, core enabling technology, or enabling technology is. And these three layers in the activity and business of the startup will define how you will approach patent filing and define your IP strategy. Same with contracts, because your core technology has to be protected and your proprietary ownership all the time. You cannot just give it away in your contracts. And thirdly, R&D or universities that you are collaborating with, they want to publish because they want to gain visibility. So make sure that you cover publications as well and that they interact. And the loops are actually there that you need to pivot. And sometimes your R&D roadmap will change, your business plan will entirely change within half a year of this startup, and all your definitions will change as well. But make sure that at least your core foundations remain. So one example of processes of being process-oriented is how we work as a business operation team within a startup. First of all, you have your business development manager. He will be the case owner, and he will have to do the negotiations with collaborators or potential collaborators that fit in your R&D plan and in your business plan. And he has to know what he can say, disclose, or not during his negotiations. And he will do also market analysis and inquiries from the market coming in. So he will make a total business roadmap. Business operation team typically exists with us with a tandem or a complementary back office team, legal and IP, who will actually iterate a lot of times with the business owner during negotiations. And the IP advisor will provide an IP model which will be translated in the contracts with the legal advisor. Secondly, if all goes well, you will end up here with a contract. And then the business developer, during negotiations, but also afterwards, needs to convince R&D to perform, to have enough resources, and when something changes or they cannot deliver, that an amendment is made to the contract, and maybe the technical statement of work needs to be adapted because some things are not feasible or are delayed or you need more time. So during your law, you have to deal with people in their core of the T-shaped profile, that they have their own agenda. Business developer management will always say everything is urgent and they need a contract right away, directly. Secondly, R&D will say, no, we're not very ready yet. We don't have a finalized product. We're too premature. We don't have any resources and we just want to do research and that's it, no development. Intellectual property right managers can be delaying because they will say we need protection first, or they don't get information in time and they are too fast to file fluff patents which are less quality, or they are too late to file because they already published something or made a white paper on the internet and then you cannot gain protection anymore, or he doesn't get enough material or feeds from the R&D center. And legal, especially I'm talking from my own experience, are too legalized. I have drafted 20-pager contracts and I just deliver them and nobody understands one single word of it. So actually, what do they need to do? Everybody of the team needs to adapt and demand. Business developer manager needs to explain why a contract is urgent, why we need to iterate fast, and convince R&D to do it. R&D needs to learn to develop MVPs, or minimal viable products, to test on the market and then to adapt and learn from it and fail fast. IP, if it fails too fast, it will have bad quality. However, he has to explain the requirements and what he needs from the R&D team, and he needs involvement. He needs to set up meetings, brainstorm sessions, etc. And he also has to trigger them that if they have something which might be new, that they just communicated it to the IP manager. And for legal, I had to change my contract methodology big time. So how did I do that? When I just started, I had 100% tunnel vision. I wanted to make perfect contracts covering all the risks, but I didn't know that actually that I was, by my 100% focus, invoking other risks at other domains, IP-wise, business-wise, R&D-wise. So we had a company of which we wanted to collaborate, and it was a startup with no resources, and they didn't want to invest in any legal advice. So we said, okay, give us then your contract template, and we will use it and review it, and we will check. And what they did was just take some scraps from other contracts and looked at the internet, and actually it was a really ugly thing. And it just didn't fit the job. So I started correcting it, and I think I had more red lines and strike-throughs than some normal things that we could accept. So all of a sudden, they were intimidated by our approach. They were reluctant of working with us. The trust was gone. And they were thinking that we were actually wanted to screw them and profit from their technology. Thanks to a good business development manager, he tried to fix the contacts. And then we started all over again. Now, what did we do? We said, what are the main issues that we need to agree upon besides all the contractual mumbo-jumbo in the contracts? Which was confidentiality information terms, how to allocate the results from your collaboration, who will file a patent or not, what will be the statement of work, and how much it will cost. So just basic concept and terms. So we made a concept note and we negotiated on the basis of that, and they agreed on it. And afterwards, based on these concepts or this term sheet, you can put in your boilerplates and then work like that. So I pivoted big time as well. And what I meant by 4D vision, and this applies not only to legal but also to IP, R&D, and BD, pivot and try to apply Pareto. Don't go covering theoretical risks because it's useless. You cannot cover everything, but try to cover 80% of the risks and take all other things into account. So, will IP management be costly? Depending actually on who you are approaching. We are trying to set up a collaboration between experts with the same vision, helping startups, not too high fees, and give a full-blown service. You have to be really well prepared to tackle all the insecurities that a startup is dealing with, and actually you need to be able to work in a really unsecure environment, because it can be that you will not get paid if the startup goes bankrupt. So actually, that's my advice, how to approach it. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have some copyright clearance because we're all with IP experts and I don't want to have a claim on or so. So here are my sources that I used, and also for the pictures. Special thanks to Vincent and also to the CEO of Forion. And these are my data whenever you feel like having a chat or contacting me.
Thank you very much for all the speakers. It's very valuable presentations. Do you have any questions to the audience?
Hi, thanks very much for the presentations. I found it very interesting. I just wanted to provide a slightly contrarian point of view from the pharmaceutical side, because I've worked in startups from the biotech and pharma side, and while I agree that many of the companies that you listed were indeed disruptive examples, I think there's a danger in that in probably more well-established industries like the pharmaceutical sector. So in that case, quite often startup companies are kind of the discovery engine for large pharmaceutical companies. So they anticipate what the larger biotechs and pharmas are going to need, and they attempt to provide a better drug. Something that the large pharma model is, I mean, the current thinking is that because the organizations are too large, they end up stepping on their own feet and they can't innovate and discover new molecules. So they actually effectively outsource that to startups. So I think in that example, it actually makes sense not to be too disruptive, if you see what I mean. So you have to understand exactly what your potential client is going to want. So I think this leads to the next point, which I wanted to make, which is I think startups do different things depending on what their exit strategy is, and I think that's something that definitely has to be taken into account. For example, I know in the biotech startup world, there are companies that want to take their product all the way to launch and beyond, and they want to be an integrated, fully integrated pharmaceutical company. Fine, I mean, but that means over the next several years, you're going to have to build up infrastructure for manufacturing, all that stuff. On the other hand, the vast majority of startups are more interested in taking the concept to what we would call proof of concept. So maybe sort of early stage clinical trials that lead to encouraging results, at which point there's a huge inflection in the price, and then you want to get bought by another company. So I think the IP strategy obviously has to be very compatible with ultimately what your end game is. So, but anyway, it was more a comment rather than a question. So
yeah, thank you very much. If I can briefly take up on this, It's true that they are trying to check what the game will be of the big pharma, and they are trying also to predict it, what they will need. But if they do so often and they talk to big pharma and they are in need of funding, what will actually happen is that they will be taken over. They just wait that the technology is available and that the company cannot live anymore or is not, valuable, and then they can take it over for a smaller price. And secondly, I don't know, can you remind me of your second remark?
I think it's important to understand what the ultimate exit strategy is going to be.
Yes, that is important, but also this proof of concept. Actually, sometimes startup companies don't have a proof of concept, and they just need bridge financing to come to the proof of concept. So that's difficult. And if you talk to pharma industries or you go to other companies, they just say, yeah, well, they're not going to jump on your technology and invest. They want a return on investment immediately, or yeah, you have to convince them, and that's the tricky part, to pitch it.
Yep, no disagreement there. But, yeah.
Yeah, actually, yesterday when you were giving the presentation about the pharma industry, I found it really informative. I'm not so familiar with that industry, but I do agree that depends. It changes from industry to industry, and even within the same industry. So this kind of reinforces what I was talking about expertise. So it's like when you go to the doctor, you don't go to someone about the heart who has another specialty. Maybe it's the same case with lawyers and lawyers advising startups. If you are working in the pharmaceutical industry, you should approach lawyers specialized in this area, and because it's not about just the lawyers, it's also about the contacts, it's also about advising, it's also sometimes like acting like a psychologist and trying to keep the momentum going. So it's about the expertise as well. So I guess what I'm trying to say is just, yeah, I agree with your comment, and
thank you very much for the comments. Is there any other question?